Say hello to Mr. Bobby Charles, Robert Bobby Charles. I've had you on the show before, I believe, haven't I?
Yes, sir, we have, and always glad to be on.
It's good to have you here. Quite a resume you have.
Well, I have been a lucky guy. I came out of rural Maine and just had a lot of lucky turns, I think.
Well, that's the idea. Take those breaks when you can get them, and now you are with the Association of Mature American Citizens, which is the conservative version of AARP. Would that be a good way to phrase it?
That's exactly right. AMAC, which you can get to by just pushing AMAC.us or Googling AMAC, is really just as you've described it. It is for those over the age of 50, but it's about the values of those, I think, often embodied by those over the age of 50, who are really more conservative by nature and not into the sort of liberal stream of things. So it is very much the conservative alternative to AARP. Of course, all the benefits that you get, the 40% off here and there, and really very economical membership is all just part of the equation. They actually, I think, the reason I am particularly drawn to them, having worked in the Reagan White House and Bush 41 White House and been an assistant secretary with Colin Powell, is that I find they're really common sense incarnate. They have a magazine that comes out quarterly that, in my view, is more informative than Time magazine. It's much more clear, accurate, and in my own view, comforting, because it delivers the real truth, and you can see, whether it's the economy or it's a political issue in the in the moment. They're very clear-headed, and the other part about this is that they represent what I would like to think of as the cornerstone issues of the American Republic in Washington. They're the folks out there defending the First Amendment, free speech, free exercise of religion, the Second Amendment, the Fourth, the Sixth. They're also looking to try to get this government back to being solvent, and frankly supporting everything from Social Security and a proper view of Medicare to some of the other issues that really dog the country. And in a moment where we're not always able to find a voice, or often I think people feel they don't have a voice, this very Reagan-esque kind of association is to me, it's very gratifying. It makes me feel good about every day going to work and helping get the message out.
Was AMAC formed after the Obamacare was put in? Because the other folks, and I'm not going to refer to them, even though they were very, very liberal, and in many stances they don't represent conservatives, but they went fully behind Obamacare, and I think that angered a lot of people.
Yeah, I think, so to get to the point of your question, about 8 or 9 years ago is when this organization came into being, and it has grown to about 2 million and just keeps growing because it represents things that people really, I think, in their heart of hearts want America to be. It was often said that Ronald Reagan was elected on 6 words, and those words were strong defense, which I think in this day and age would include a protection of our border and citizenship. The second 2 words were smaller government, and that goes broadly to, ordered liberty, but also to the idea that we do not need the federal government telling us not to do 1,000 things and to do a bunch of other things. And finally, lower taxes were the other 2 words. And I think in many regards, if you add to that a good moral compass and a sense that our governing leaders should support us rather than we being supportive of them, they're there to serve us, not the other way around. You get back to basics. And in many ways, AMAC represents what I'd like to think of as the World War II generation plus. It's a group of everybody. I'm 59, but I know of people that are in their 40s and 30s that very much believe and think and benefit from the way that AMAC presents itself. It's about traditional America. And I come from a military family. I spent 10 years as an intelligence officer in the Navy. And I'll tell you, I think every young American should just walk through Arlington once and understand, or a military cemetery near you, and understand that America is not an accident. It is a product of enormous sacrifice and of great risk-taking, and I think those are the principles that AMAC fights for every day.
And aspiration. There was an article, and I brought it up to my guest yesterday, an article in Imprimis magazine back in July, and they talked about what makes America great and the differences, and the every citizen has aspiration. You either want to be a professional football player or baseball player, or you want to be the head of a CEO. You want to have your own company. You want to do something different to get ahead and actually make your own and your family's futures brighter. And that's what this country allows. But you have this gaggle of Democrats that are out there promising that we're gonna pay down, we're gonna forgive all the student loan debts that are out there. Then forget about that $22 trillion deficit, the national debt that's out there. Don't worry about that. This is all stacking up, and it's only going to get worse.
You are so right, and I think it's ironic that an organization like AMAC and the principles you and I are talking about right now are even more at risk today than they were 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, because you have people openly advocating for socialism, which is essentially the centralized control of the means and distribution of all resources. And it is we know historically there is not a place in the world that socialism has not migrated ever closer to ever greater centralization of power, in some cases leading to communism, and in all cases literally grinding down the average citizen's opportunities. And it's essentially a direct trade-off. Centralized power is a direct trade-off with individual liberty. So when you ultimately give up your individual liberty to the government because you think you're going to get something for free, what you've given up is really the prerogatives over your own life. I'll give you an example. You asked a question at the beginning of this interview, and I think it's fascinating. You asked me, with that resume, how did it all happen? And I'll tell you how it happened. I was a kid who grew up in rural Maine, and my mother was a school teacher, raised 4 kids, and she said, you believe in yourself. You go out, you get educational loans, we'll do our level best. You do your best at scholarship and sports, and we'll see where it leads. And we all did that, all 4 of us kids. We tried our very best to get out there, and I took great pride in the fact that someone had enough faith in me to give me educational loans, and I honestly never resented a single day of having to pay that money back, because I put some skin in the game. I believed that I could do what I hoped to do, and my siblings did the same. And frankly, I think that's part of America. You just don't walk into a business. You don't just walk into an educational institution. You have to earn your way there. As the Marines like to say, earned, never given. And that is the cornerstone of success in all things, and certainly America. So I feel very privileged that in America we've got a shot at anything we want to put our mind, heart, and head to. And if we can put a shoulder to the wheel and make things work, we deserve credit for it. And I don't care if someone becomes a billionaire. I'm not one, but if someone becomes one, God bless them.
Well, yeah, that's the nice thing about this country. Anybody can. You just have you build the better mousetrap and you win. But then you have these people that are out there and just want to, control everything. It was Ronald Reagan that said if there was a knock at your door, you open it up and said, "Hello, I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help you." He said, "Shut the door."
Yeah, I worked for Ronald Reagan, and I have to tell you that the thing that I probably loved the best was his self-deprecating good humor. He could put in a story like that one, but he could put a fine point on just about anything. And one thing that he truly believed in was the American people. He believed that any individual American could do almost anything they wanted to, as long as the federal government got out of their way.
Yeah, exactly. Robert Bobby Charles, my guest here, and with AMAC, which is the Association of Mature American Citizens. If they want to join, or if they want to find out more about AMAC, how do they do that?
Absolutely. Just Google, put in AMAC or put in amac.us, and membership is very economical.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate not only your service, but also being on the show with me here. Robert Bobby Charles with AMAC, which is Association of Mature American Citizens.